Hello, and you all can hear me. Hi, I'm Shivani, and welcome to this session on best practices for always-on agents to support critical workloads. Session is more about all the outages that we've been seeing around us. 2 days back, Cloudflare went down. Back in last week of October, Azure went down. 2 weeks before that, AWS had outage, which almost cost them $215 million in SLA insurance. And so as the whole world is moving towards AI and towards AI workloads and agents, resiliency and making sure that you can actually keep your agents always on has become more important than ever. And that is what this session is about. So basically, you all are here, which tells me that, hey, resiliency matters, at least to all of you. And so, like I mentioned, all the other outages that have happened since the case I mentioned over here, specifically the Norway East, was a fascinating case just because of the oohs and ahs I would always get when I told that story. What happened specifically in Norway East was the cooling system failed inside the data center. And because of that, the temperatures started rising, and it was recorded at like 52 degrees Celsius. Around 48 racks started auto shutting down. Obviously, the cooling that triggered the sprinklers to go off. And as any of you who has experienced what happens when the sprinklers rain after 10 years of jammed pipes, it was black liquid raining on top of those data center racks. Within 25 minutes, Azure actually announced outage for a bunch of storage and compute services that were locally being served out of that data center. And we were being served out of that data center as well. However, so by the way, I represent Power Platform and Dynamic 365 product line. And Power Platform did not go down. And the reason it did not go down was because of the best practices and the way you architect. There are lots of services which claim to be highly available. Yes, they support high availability, but the point is, have you architected their best practices the way they have recommended? And it's not always that easy. So there are a bunch of services which go above and beyond in trying to actually do it for you. And that's where the mindfulness comes in making sure that you are either adopting those services or you are taking the onus of making sure you go that extra step and architect it right. And so that was the story from Norway, where any customers on Power Platform did not see the outage. It was seamless for them. They don't even know that Norway East went down. And so that is what most of our head of operations are losing their sleeps over. Their biggest concern is, oh my God, what happens if my business goes down? How much of a loss am I going to see? And almost all services, almost all businesses today are global. We all serve across the globe. We want to sell our services across the globe. So how, as a head of operations, can I make sure that my businesses, my now new AI workloads, my agents are actually up and running? What's the point of all this, like being cutting edge, and then a simple outage happens, someone misconfigured something or kicked a router, and I'm down for 15 hours? Doesn't work. So that said, this actually aligns with what we are hearing from our customers as well. As Philip Bullard from T-Mobile gave his quote to us, that he constantly loses his sleep over like the next update or upgrade would actually bring his metros down nationwide, and there would be some metros that may not have customer service or sales or store functionality because of some application going down, right? We're not handling outages perfectly, and that's a very big deal for him. So why resiliency matters? The boring answer would be, yeah, sure, we want to minimize downtime and we want to provide business continuity. But to be very true, we all can live with a few minutes of outage here and there. We all can walk away and go get a coffee and take a break. No one is dying in that unless you're really, really mission critical and in an operation room. But that said, the reputational risk and the financial risk that now comes with being down is crazy. Like I just mentioned, Amazon released the numbers that their 15-hour outage costed them just in SLA insurance $215 million. And that's not a small sum of money, and not every business can afford that kind of SLA insurance. You get hit by something like that, that really affects how you plan the rest of the quarters for your business. So yes, I think we all agree resiliency matters. And that is where we bring to you managed availability. So for high availability, we have near zero downtime with Azure availability zones implemented right. Now, Azure availability zones, just like I mentioned, is a service. You all have it too. You all can go and implement it in your business. But architecting it right is not that easy of a feat. It is a lot of work to do it right. And we totally believe we've done it right. We see lots of outages, and we see how much we are down and not down. And so we also see an internal RPO of near zero for, and we are truly highly available. Also, we bring to you automated backups and point-in-time restore with that, which has been there for a while. But not only that, now you have self-service disaster recovery. So as you're aware, when say Azure goes down or AWS goes down, you're watching that admin center like a hawk, waiting for the next update to type in. And you're all sitting on that bridge. You have no extra information than whatever the internet is actually tweeting about. But at the same time, you want control at that point. You want to be able to push that button and say, you know what? I'm not going to wait for your thing to come through 4 hours later. I don't want my business down. I'm going to actually fail over. You know, and so that is where we give you the power of self-service disaster recovery. You can also do emergency drills. Like, you don't have to wait for the next outage to test it out. And so that is another big concern for our head of operations. Until now, you go across all the businesses that offer business continuity and disaster recovery services. None of them actually let you do a real-time test. This is not a simulation. You actually fail over your entire production to a remote region and fail it back in real time. And so we actually let you do that too for your compliance drills. So your compliance drill is no more a 300-page booklet of best practices saying, oh, this could happen, that could happen. We're actually implementing those best practices for you. And so you can actually test out your compliance and actually see. And most of our ecosystems are not limited to one application that we use. We're not just, so for all of you, any of you are using Power Platform, it's not like you're only using Power Platform. You could be using so many other resources, whatever is the best decision for your company. And so from that perspective, when you fail over, you'll realize, oh, okay, Shivani said Power Platform would fail over, it did, but all these other things didn't. And so all the other things that you need to take care of in that case. And so, as the title says, doing justice to the title, we're going to create look at a simple agent, which is an insurance company agent, and we will actually see a failover failback for that agent. So as you see over here, this is my typical Power Platform managed environment. And as you see, it shows an environment over here. I'm not going to bore you through the entire demo, so I'm going to skip to a more interesting part over here. And so let me know if you see it. So this is my environment, and if I actually, you see this, did I zoom it out? So as you see over here, I'm going into the Copilot Studio, and that's my insurance agent right there. And if I click on that insurance agent, basically I can go in more detail about what that agent is doing. It's a very simple, straightforward agent, but it really matters how you created your agent, right? So as you've learned at this Ignite, almost every Microsoft product is now saying, hey, I have an agent. And so it's confusing enough to learn about these 50, 60, 80 agents. And then you can go create your own as well. So the type of agent, I may need help to zoom out of this. How did I zoom in so bad that I can't figure out how to get out? Oh, we are good. Okay, so, so this agent, basically, I'm prompting it to check something that I'm very curious about. I'm suddenly seeing spikes in some of the customers who keep filing a lot of claims, and they get a lot of rejections, but they also get through the system a lot. And so someone who works in this company is very curious about what's going on. And so I basically have this agent that goes and runs and tries to identify that, okay, in this case, Carol and Eva And this another person were the people who had very high risk scores. And so now what you see, I'm going to pause this for a second. So as you see over here, I went back to my, so here, this is my environment, and this is in the corner you see my disaster recovery. And when I click open on it, it actually gives me the option of, let me do that. So as you see over here, when I clicked disaster recovery reason, what do I want to do? I have two options over here. I could either select that compliance drill, or I could actually say failover. Now failover actually means that I have a secondary copy, which is already enabled, and it is receiving every single I/O asynchronously. Law of physics, there will be a latency. So say I'm in US East as primary, and my secondary is in US Central or US West. In that case, my I/O is traveling across the country. So there will naturally be a law of physics where they are not in sync, and the delay between them could be a few seconds to 30 seconds. We've seen up to 2-3 minutes of delays between the images. But again, it totally depends on how large your environment is, how big your database is. And so we would love to hear your numbers when you try this out, to let me know, hey, this is the difference in time that I'm seeing with my secondary. When we had launched this product in preview, back in February-March timeframe, around 706 customers tried it out. So the 2 to 3 minute time that I'm observing came from that number. Those 706 customers, the average time gap between primary and secondary was around 2 minutes. So that's what you see over here. Let's unpause. So if you select, say, in this case, disaster recovery drill, this is the time gap that you see. So if you see, it's actually prompting you saying, here is the time difference, and say your local time is 10:27, and you see that my secondary is showing a time of 10:26. There you go. That's your 1 minute of delay. And that means that if you are failing over, you are saying, quiesce all my I/Os on primary, and I'm ready. Fail this entirely over to the secondary. You have to let the I/Os in flight go. So you're accepting that data loss. That is your data loss. That 1 minute of I/Os in flight, you're saying, don't wait for it. It's okay. My secondary is 1 minute behind. I accept. There's a real outage. I don't want to take a chance. Failover. So that is your data loss, and you fail over. And so that's what you would see here. Now, with a lot of power comes a lot of responsibility. You are about to fail your production environment of your company. This is very, very important. So for namesake, we are making you type. That typing doesn't do anything. It's just so that you're aware. You didn't accidentally fat finger it. You're typing the name of your environment here. This is more of like a conscious step that I know what I'm doing. And so you basically, oh, what did I do? So wait. Let me go back. This was just my agent doing its magic, trying to find information, and I was live chatting with it. Then I realized there's a disaster, so I decided to go to my SSDR, my self-service disaster recovery, select failover, and I type in my environment name. And then when I say, let's do it, failover. So it is actually going to do a few steps. It's going to validate. It's going to go run all the background operations for it. It's going to prepare my database and make sure everything is in the right state to failover. And then basically it will finalize and kick it off. And so when you enable SSDR on an environment, it does need to meet a certain criteria, which I'll go over in slides to come. But that is your SSDR failover. And so when you have failover, this is this thing that you see on the other side. Now, on the primary side, we have something called availability zones, which I'll go in more detail in the slides to come. But on the secondary side, you do not have availability zones. And so that is why you're running with limited resource. And so we just try to make you very aware, saying you are running with limited resource. That means you have all the storage and compute you need for your application, But we don't want you to get excited saying, oh, I was in East, I want to go to West, let me just use SSDR to fail over. Your resiliency score just went significantly lower in that failed over region because it doesn't have availability zones implemented. So I'll go more detail, and then I just go back to my agent, like I was chatting with it, and I continue to ask it questions, and I'm just asking a repeat question over here, saying, okay, who were my top 3 customers, who I think I should be more diligent about going and looking, why have they been seeing all these claim rejections and stuff. And so it's still consistent, it's still working fine. It's there's like, because of the guardrails, it's not hallucinating, it's not giving me random people's names, it's showing me consistent answers, and so it actually gives me the same answers. I know that because this is a recorded demo. So it will spit out the same names, Carol, Eva, and the third person. But the whole idea is that your agent just failed over. Now, over here, what really matters a lot is the kind of agent you create. So I'm going to go back to a specific place in my demo. A second. Here. So you are over here when you go to from your environment to your Copilot agent. Right. In your Copilot agent, right before you, if you've been to microsoftcopilot.com site, you see a create button on the left up. It's like a pretty big, obvious create button. If you create your agents using that, those are called custom agents because you can really customize them. You can figure out what knowledge sources. It does not use any of the canned stuff for it. And so you control, and you can actually make it a multi-agent orchestrated agent as well. You can add all kinds of MCP servers to it. You can add 3P agents and 3P knowledge sources and all kinds of things to it. The agent created from that create button is called a custom agent. Now there are lots of different kinds of agents like conversational agents, declarative agents, and this Ignite, I think there are another 5 kinds of agents that you likely heard about. Specifically, the custom agents are stored on top of Power Platform, on top of Dataverse. That's again going by the best practices, realizing where your resources are coming from, where are they being saved, and are they being architected the right way, right? So moving on. So talking about best practices and architecture and design specifically, right? This is where Azure Front Door comes into conversation. The outage that happened October last week. It happened on October 29th, and I was actually at Power Platform Community Conference presenting a similar topic on resiliency over there. And so the next morning when I had my presentation, I actually asked the room saying, okay, we had a pretty big outage yesterday. How many of you use Power Platform and how many of you were down? And it was a very risky question, and I'm so thankful. Not a single hand in the room went up, and a lot of people were using Power Platform. And so it's very interesting why Power Platform did not see outage. A lot of people would have. Now, Azure Front Door basically had a configuration management issue, and it just propagated that configuration file to a bunch of point of presence points across the globe. So anyone who was using Azure Front Door basically saw the outage. Now, as if you're using Power Platform and any of your Azure services, you can totally go use Azure Front Door as well. It's not a free service, it's not a mandatory service, it's not a recommended service, it's just another product, and you can totally use it. It has a lot of very cool functionality and very useful functionality. It is a global, highly available service, but it comes down to how you have implemented it. They do not take the onus of saying, oh, we are going to do any failover, failback. They have the pieces available for any customer to go implement it. They have best practices and they have all the jargon that goes with it. They do not say that we are a highly available service. They're saying you need to architect that. And that is where the subtle difference of services starts coming into the picture. There's so many services which claim, oh yeah, sure, we are global. They're global means they are presenting their service from some local point of presence. But if an outage happens, will they fail over? Will they fail back? or are they active? That's a very important little piece of information that you want to start inquiring when you are designing a solution, especially for a mission critical workload, for your AI workload, which suddenly you're about to take a full dependency on. So moving forward, what are we doing from our perspective on Power Platform and Dynamics 365 that I can claim that, oh, we are highly available? There's a lot that goes into it. And so if an outage happens, and by the way, for any complex system, for me to say, oh, we can handle every single outage is not going to be true. I'm going to be lying totally lying if I say, oh, we'll never have an outage. No, the point is, if an outage happens, how do I make sure that the blast radius is absolutely minimal? Like from the concept of cloud native and fail fast, and from the concept of making sure that if something happens, it acts like an absolute microservice, and only one thing goes down, it doesn't take anything else down with it. And it recovers very fast, so that, or it fails over, or it's active, along those lines. And so that is where the three principles that our engineering really doubles down in implementing are partitioning, process, and monitoring. So on partitioning side, we really want to make sure that on this first principle, that we're partitioning all our services. So Power Platform and Dynamics 365 literally use more than 220 Azure services, just like a lot of you do. And so if we use an Azure service, we do pay bills for it internally. It's not like it's free for us. So we use the service, we pay for the service. And so we are referred to the same best practices. It's sure, you want to use our service, but hey, you have to go implement these best practices. And so with that, keeping that in mind, we have actually gone ahead and implemented availability zones. So if there is an outage within a data center, for example, there was an electricity grid failure, the Norway outage, I gave examples of cooling, networking, hardware failures, a local storm, a local fire, some vehicle ran into the data center, or a person just fat-fingered something locally in that data center, or kicked a router. All those kinds of outages, which actually can bring an entire data center down, or that entire zone down, those kinds of outages are totally taken care of by availability zone, the way we have implemented it. Not only that, say another zone. So we have made sure that with availability zone implementation, your production workloads are synchronously. This is not asynchronous like I was talking about with self-service, disaster recovery. This is synchronous, which means every single IO is actually being copied in real time to at least 2 other, and in some cases 3 other zones, to make sure that if one of them goes down, your traffic is just directed to the other one. There's no failover, failback here. It's active. So, and even 2 go down, you will still see no outage. It will just direct your traffic to the 3rd zone in that case. And so you should see absolutely no outage. And any of you who lives and sees and spends a lot of time on the Microsoft Admin Center watching all the outages, you should be very losing your sleep and very consciously aware how many outages happen literally on a daily basis and on a weekly basis. And if you're a Power Platform and Dynamics 365 customer, you also know that you don't see any of them because of availability zones implemented, right? So I see a lot of customers reaching out to me saying, yeah, but you're using availability zone. I mean, you can use it too. Go ahead, try it out. It's a massive effort. And to do it right is no easy feat. And so as you see in this diagram that I show below, basically it's literally synchronously copying it. And so that is why I can claim that your production loads, and this is, by the way, for free, if you are using Dynamics 365 or Power Platform or any of the applications running on top of Power Platform, this is for your all production workloads. You just enjoy this extra resiliency all the time for no extra cost. So that said, what happens if a disaster brings my entire region down? Now, this is not very common, but more and more global outages, superstorms, and things like that have become a more common day affair these days. Also, politically charged up geo outages have also become a very likely scenario, saying, oh, okay, something did not work and the entire region electricity was turned off, or a war broke out, or those kinds of scenarios are becoming more and more of a bigger concern. And so with that is where you may want to consider self-service disaster recovery, where you enable a copy, an asynchronous copy, to go to a remote region, right? Now for this remote region to be supported, like I mentioned, we are using around 220, more than that at this point, Azure services. And so we do rely on Azure region pairs to support self-service disaster recovery. So no, you can't just failover anywhere you want. We also have to follow the legislative boundaries and residency laws and sovereignty and all those. We don't want you to get in trouble, and if we allow you, we get in trouble. So no, absolutely no violation of residency laws and everything. So no, we can't let you fail over wherever you want just because you have business there. So you will fail within the region, within the residency law boundaries, very strictly guided by our lawyers and legal folks in the company. But at the same time, it's controlled by the Azure region pair as well. So even within a region, for example, US has a lot of regions. No, you cannot pick that I want to go to this region or that region, because we want to make sure that, hey, one, the region has the right amount of compute, the right amount of storage. We can make sure that you need to scale. If you have to scale and it's Black Friday, or even if it is not, we have to make sure that your business can just suddenly exponentially scale because you just got a big opportunity at Super Bowl. It could be anything for your business. So we have to make sure that you have that room to suddenly have that explosive growth. And so, but also, other than that, if a region does not have the Azure region pair, that region today is obviously not supported for self-service disaster recovery. So that said, moving on to the next very important principle is around safe and resilient deployment practices. And this is where another outage, like Cloudflare, comes into the picture, which is unfortunate. But hey, things happen. We are all in software, and so we know bugs will always creep in. And the more complex the system, the failures are going to be there. So what do you do again to make sure that you're really mitigating your failures and minimizing your blast radius? And this is where we actually very heavily go about safe and resilient deployment practices. So as you all know, in case of Cloudflare, 2 days back, basically the database generated a large enough file. It was so large that it basically violated all their footprint and bunch of services, and their software couldn't handle that super large file. It almost started looking like a DDoS attack, and all kinds of stuff was on the internet of what is happening. But Cloudflare released that, okay, it was a unexpectedly very large file generated. And sounds so silly and so small, but obviously it was not small. If you were Uber, if you were Spotify, if you were Twitter, if you were one of those companies, you were down. And that affected your business and your reputation. And obviously, people know who Cloudflare is. So that said, we have a safe deployment practice that we follow. And we have these concepts of various stations. And we make sure that as we are rolling our software, and it moves from one station to another, as we are discovering more bugs, we actually try to minimize the exposure and make sure that, hey, like there are a lot of companies that actually need to move very, very fast with AI. If you were talking about what is the latest and greatest and what's happening in the AI world, just over the week, the world has changed, right? The things that were cool and news yesterday are like old and like redundant kind of a thing already this week. So a lot of companies really need to move at that super, super fast pace. And in that case, they don't want to wait for a 6-week development cycle and, oh, you'll give me something. It's okay. I'm experimenting and I'm moving very fast. Allow me to move very fast in that case. And so they have a lower risk profile, and we are working on obviously agentizing this and making sure that our customers, we meet their needs and demands, and if they need to move very fast and pick up releases very fast and update very fast, we are giving them that. And then there are companies that are hardcore enterprises. They're like, don't touch me. You better know what you're doing. Do not break me. And so we make sure that, hey, by the time the software reaches them, it has gone through extra resiliency, extra checks, extra testing and validation. And we learn a lot from our customers. We have a huge customer base which runs into millions. And so when all these millions of users start testing, the number of corner cases that you all end up informing us about, we cannot do that internally, no way. So it's these early stations and the feedbacks from the customer that we really turn it around very quickly, moving from one station to another. And so by this time the software has rolled out to the all the geographies, all the regions, it is very solid. And making sure that we can scale, we don't have a ratio of for 1 million customers out there, we don't have that kind of engineering force behind it. So you have to really make sure that we are not getting buried by the number of bugs that are being created. So this safe deployment practice has really, really helped us. Also with all the agentic work we've done, all the synthetic workloads, learning from the customer profiles and what we see in the ICMs and bugs and everything, more and more synthetic workloads are being deployed to actually take the testing to another level. So that said, moving on to the third and very, very important principle around monitoring and scale. All said and done, failures will still happen. It's a complex system. And so you need to really watch it like a hawk. You want all the right alerting. You actually, this is where you really want to agentize as much as you can. And if a lot of you attended any of the Azure Monitor sessions and around the AI observability features lighting up, like I mentioned again, we are using so many Azure services. It is awesome for us to learn all the observability that all these layers are using, and we really want to stay ahead of the curve by using all of that and lighting it up and using every possible tool that is in there, because we don't want to be blindsided. So if there is more observability that was lit by any of our services, we want to make sure that we are looking at that one extra parameter and reacting in real time and making sure if we can predict, project, we are doing that, and we are reacting as soon as we can to, again, minimize the blast radius of any of the issues we are seeing. So we are also using Azure Brain. We are using, so any new tools that get announced, the moment we find out about it, we are as curious as any of you as a customer about these Azure services, and we go quickly, try to engage, try to learn, and try to use them. Again, that's a very strong best practice recommendation for all of your businesses. All said and done, you could plan everything, but things will still happen. So you must have an end-to-end observability and a very close monitoring method for everything that you're using as deeply as you can, and a way of not just alerting, but reacting to it. And so that is where agents start becoming a very good friend. For example, even for self-service disaster recovery. Now that you have the pulse on the finger, what if you decided to take a half-an-hour break and an outage happened right there? Could you have saved your company that half an hour? Sure, Azure will not still react and tell you for another 1 hour if the outage is going on, but you could have minimized. And how do you know? You wouldn't have known. Otherwise, you obviously wouldn't have left that server room. You left and the outage happened. So by the time you found out, you're out of the building, you are in your car, now you're walking back to the building, getting in. By the time you get it, another 20 minutes gone. So now you're feeling all guilty, saying, oh, could I have saved my production another 20 minutes? This is where an agent can totally help you. And creating agents is really easy. It could be a very simple agent, which is just watching all the alerts for you, watching all these public-facing sites which actually tell you about outages, like a Twitter outage and stuff like that. You could follow all these engines and generate a confidence score and basically react to it. We considered, at least on the product side, we seriously considered saying, can we just light up an agent and make people's lives easy? The concern is we have such a huge customer base, we cannot predict what is a confidence level that is okay for you or your business. Can I say 60% is good enough to fail over, or is it 90%? What is your personal threshold for failing over? On what basis can I try to predict you? Which is very wrong on my part. I should not try to predict you. I don't know you enough, right? So, and making that agent is just so easy that it's like it's a click, click, next kind of a thing. So I would encourage you to actually go play with custom agents, create one for yourself, and actually at least make yourself more informed, where it actually reaches out and tells you that, hey, this is going on, and you can make a more informed decision. So with that, it's not just the monitoring of just what is happening in our stack. We are also looking at various metrics, all the logs that we can get access to. And in the end, it results in all these alerting that we generate. And it doesn't stop at alerting. It has to, in the end, come back with mitigation. Like there has to be, and now, thank you, agents. It's more about automating those steps and minimizing the human in the loop. Now that said, the human in the loop is still very important when you're about to pull a plug. For example, you could actually have agents make the call saying, okay, here is my criteria. You've met these 10, 15 criteria. If all these are true, go ahead, like push that button. Because it's an API in the end, you can totally automate the SSDR to be pushed with an API as well. But that said, you may want a human in the loop because your entire production environment is about to fail over. And so we still think it's important to have the human in the loop, and so that's another reason why we are not already giving you a simple little agent there. We think we are getting there, but we are still not there. And so with that, going back to 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗶𝗶𝗺𝗀𝗀, luckily for us, he actually tested SSDR. It's one thing to have tried things in preview and played around with them and actually tested the product and be delighted by it. And I was so thankful that he actually reacted like a few days back and said, hey, we actually tested SSDR and it works flawlessly for them. So he is definitely sleeping better, and so can you. The purpose of this slide is just basically to show you how easy and simple it is for Power Platform and Dynamics 365 basically. You really have no configuration to do. You don't have hundreds of things to take care of. Anything and everything running on top of Power Platform, which means Power Apps, Power Automate, your Power BI, a bunch of all the Dynamics 365 Control Center, and now also Finance and Operations. All the things that, but remember, on Power Platform, you can create custom apps as well. And if you are creating a custom app and you decide to make a choice saying, you know what, I don't think I want to use this service. For my business, I want to use some other service. Just be cognizant of, does that fail over or not? For that reason, if you have a custom app, if you're using something from outside, you could use Salesforce connectors, you could use SAP connectors, you could use all kinds of Snowflake connectors. All those services out there are there to enable you, but they are all not resilient or may not be resilient. So just be mindful that you are taking care of that failover. That will not fail over just because the rest of your application is sitting on top of Power Platform. Anything that is sitting on top of Power Platform will fail over with self-service disaster recovery. Everything that is sitting on Power Platform does take the advantage of availability zones. So your primary region has that advantage of 3 extra zones and all is taken care of. You don't see outages in your primary region. All that is for everything sitting on top of Power Platform. Any connectors, plugins, anything going out of that ecosystem in your extended ecosystem will not automatically fail over if they are not running active-active, if they are not a global service. So please be aware of that. Again, this slide simply shows how easy it is to just pick a compliance drill or emergency response and failover. Now, if you pick compliance drill, now it's called a drill because your production environment did not go down. That's the only part of simulation. We make it think that your production went down. And so basically, we simulate for the software that, okay, this environment, primary is gone, fail it over. And so it will actually fail over your entire environment to the secondary, but that failover is real. If you have real connections, again, do not press that button without realizing the responsibility of this is a production workload, you are failing it over. So with that bunch of things which I mentioned, that again I would strongly recommend you are aware of and you take care of as you are planning your AI mission critical workloads and agents and everything. One, obviously you can leverage the built-in resiliency for Dataverse, for Power Platform, and for the ecosystem that we already provide with self-service disaster recovery, but it doesn't stop there. You should be very cognizant of all the services end to end and find out if they are highly available or not. If you are using Power Platform, you're using Power Apps, and you have an app, and you're not sure, reach out to us. We'll work with you to find out more about the architecture and just check through all the services you're using and give you and like handhold you saying, okay, these are covered, these will fail over, these will not. Let's reach out to these orgs or these products and make sure that they are supporting or figuring out how they are supporting active or global, being global, and making sure that you have a stronger resiliency story. So please make sure that you're extending the protection that I was talking about with Power Platform to your extended ecosystem if you're using all those other services. And then all this doesn't last long. Things change so fast. People fix bugs all the time, and when there's time pressure, they will do the fastest thing to just get past that bug. And so they could actually do something that would hurt your resiliency. They could suddenly create a dependency that you weren't aware of or that was not architected, and suddenly now because of that dependency doesn't fail over. And so now that service doesn't fail over, though it used to. So it's very important that you actually test your compliance or your failover, failback very regularly at regular intervals. Testing it once a year does not cover it. Testing it even 2 times a year does not cover it. Like, things are changing so fast from under your nose that you should be very involved and engaged. And again, you want it automated as much as possible. None of us have that much resources that we can just have someone sitting on the side doing all kinds of disaster recovery drills. So you want it automated, you want it taken care of. But again, depending on the complexity of your ecosystem, really just make sure that you have more end-to-end validated testing. And then you do want monitoring at the end of it. Just going back to self-service disaster recovery, it is disabled by default because it's not a free feature. It does cost you. And so you do need to have a managed environment. However, the availability zone that I mentioned is included by default. You don't pay anything for it. If you're using Power Platform and you have a production environment, you just have it. So you do have that very strong extra resiliency with your primary environment, irrespective of whether you use SSDR or not. SSDR is just for asynchronous secondary remote copy. For that, your environment must be a managed environment, which means it needs a premium license. And you need to enable PayGo. And the reason you need to enable PayGo specifically is to actually protect you from paying overages. PayGo plan, basically what it does is just connects your environment to your Azure subscription. It doesn't charge you or anything. It just connects it to a billing plan. And you can set all kinds of thresholds saying, okay, I have 10 GB of storage. When I get to 8 GB, tell me I'm running out of storage. When I'm getting to 7.5 GB, can you generate an alert for me? Can you notify all these people about it? You can do all kinds of fancy custom alerts, and that's the whole point. We realized that, hey, PayGo already has it. We shouldn't go and build one more alerting system. People can just enable that, and that way they can actually leverage the all the alerting mechanisms that they have. We don't want you to pay overage. We absolutely don't want you to. And so the idea is that if you have free storage, it should automatically first use your free storage. So say on the primary side, you have 10 GB of our environment, and you enable SSDR on that environment. It will go occupy 10 GB of storage on the remote secondary site, create the connections and everything, and start the asynchronous copy. Once the copy has been created, it will actually tell you SSDR is ready. And now whatever IOs are coming on your primary are being sent to your secondary as well. But it's asynchronous because we are not holding for an ACK on that IO, just so that you don't get hit by the latencies of wherever the IOs are going, right? So that's why asynchronous, and basically you are only paying for that 10 GB on the secondary side, not charging you for compute and everything else and all the 220 services we pay for. We're only charging you for the storage that you use on the secondary side. But if you already have additional 10 GB storage lying around, we'll actually take that 10 GB first. We will not try to charge you overage or anything. You could also use your Azure credits. You could also use your accreditations and all kinds of entitlements if you have any. If you are working with CSMs and accounts, you can totally work with accounts for, like if you have a deal for a better price on storage, you could totally work with your CSMs and accounts to extend that for SSDR. Lots of routes. No, we don't want you to pay for overage. But that said, it's mandatory to enable PayGo to make sure that if you hit overage, you're being taken care of for your bills. And you have the alerting mechanisms. And the capacity meter that runs on the secondary side does include your database files and logs. Time check. So very quickly, bunch of announcements for self-service disaster recovery roadmap. We are now supporting 365 contact center, and we are also supporting field service, sales, commercial cloud. Now GCC is supported, Power Apps, Power Automate, desktop flows is supported, Power Pages is supported, and we just went in preview for finance and operations. There is a preview link, which is obviously you can't click right now. So my name is Shivani Pradhan, and my email address is firstname.lastname@microsoft.com. Reach out to me if you're interested in signing up for any of the previews. We also have the Power Automate cloud flows now available and supported fully. Again, you would be like, shouldn't it automatically support it? Isn't it on Power Platform? Like I explained, Cloudflow was using a specific Azure storage service, which was not active. So we couldn't have claimed, though everything else was supported, that one service would not have made them fail over perfectly. So they were not supported when we went GA. And the Azure storage service actually is finally going GA at Ignite. And we want to build an extra resiliency. So though we could have also gone GA, we are like, no, hold on. We'll see how this goes. We don't want to expose our so many million customers to, like, be assured, Azure storage did a great job. But hey, they are just another group, and they are people like us. And I don't know their safe deployment practices, but I know my safe deployment practices. So we'll just give it a few extra months to make sure if we see any early errors and everything from preview, make sure we have built in extra resiliency there before we announce GA. Targeted GA right now is around December 2025. But again, if we see a lot of bugs, we'll extend it to probably Jan. Thank you, and thank you for being here.